Hello, everybody. My name's Jason Vansickle, and I'm a VP of Curation and Education here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. And I'd like to welcome you guys all to a closer look across the pond with Kenny Brack. We're really excited to have this conversation today, but I do have a few items that we want to broadcast before. We would like to ask if everyone would stay muted during this program. Feel free to type in any questions that you have in the chat located on the bottom here. Towards the end of the conversation, we will ask those Q&A questions. So make sure that you check out and type in your questions there for Kenny. And also, this is new for us. We have a quick poll that should be appearing on the screen. The question is how many in today's audience were there in 1999 to see Kenny win his Indianapolis 500 championship. So make sure we answer those. But a little bit of an introduction here. We have a very special guest today. He's joining us from the UK, so there is a time difference there. So we're respective and appreciative of that. He's a multi-discipline driver. Obviously a IndyCar IRL champion and Indianapolis 500, but also had success in kart, IROC, and a X Games Rallycross driver and gold medal champion in that. I'd love to introduce 1999 Indianapolis 500 champion Kenny Brack.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today. It's one of these great opportunities that we have to, especially with technology today, to be able to have a conversation with you. We usually see you during the month of May here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but we're giving our members another unique opportunity to get to know some of the winning 500 drivers of the 500, and it's going to be a pretty good time that we'll have here. So kind of start off, we had a chance last week to discuss and talk about some of your background, but for our guests that we have here, what was it growing up in Sweden in your early days in auto racing, and what really led you to lead to a successful championship-filled career?
It's hard to say, if you look at the journey from where I was born and grew up to Indy, it's pretty hard to imagine that can happen, because I grew up in the middle of, just forests and, lakes and wild animals, basically. And, but I had an interest for cars and driving. My dad used to take me driving on the ice in the wintertime when the ice was frozen on the lake, and we had the Swedish Rally on the other side of the lake, the special stage. They came by there, and so we used to drive across and watch these cars, very exciting. And lots of snow, and in the middle of the night, because at that time rally was driven in the night as well. They drove in, like at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And so this was very exciting, getting up, in the middle of the night and all that stuff. And then my dad let me drive, on the ice. And I don't know, I probably was 6 or 7 years old. And I really liked the balancing act of a car, to slide and to control it. And I guess it took off. Well, the interest was born there, and then it was a matter of getting the opportunity to do something with it. And that was difficult because we didn't have any resources to let me go karting or anything. So I drove normal cars on the ice, on gravel roads, and from very early age. And then I did a summer work at a youth hostel nearby, and the owner there, he was a little bit involved in racing. And so when I showed up, I was mowing the lawns there. I showed up in my dad's car with a trailer behind, and I was 12 years old, and I had the lawnmower on the trailer, and I could reverse with this lawn, the trailer. And so he saw this, and so he, instead of paying me, he bought me a go-kart. and he also happened to have the only asphalted space in the whole village in front of the youth hostel. So started off with doing demonstration runs for the school teacher, school kids that were there and stuff like that. And then somehow this road opened up, took many years, but there you go.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear the stories about how that passion and that interest in racing ignited. And obviously, the Scandinavian countries, especially Sweden, bring some top-notch talent not only to IndyCar racing but across the world, especially in rallying. There's obviously some sort of transfer. You see that with multidiscipline drivers, but what really helps in a focus of rally driving that can transfer into, say, open cockpit, open wheel racing or pavement racing?
Well, they're quite different, those disciplines. I think that it's really good to start early and drive cars on slippery surfaces and really low friction, because it really gives you the sensitivity and the knowledge and the feel for how to control a car. But I would think that I would, if you go from racing to rally, I think that's easier. That's an easier transition, because in racing you have to be more tidy with your driving, because the margins are so small. So if you're not right on your marks and all that stuff, it costs time. And it's tight in racing, very tight, hundredths of a second, tenth of a second. Going from rallying to racing, that's not so often that's successful for some reason. So I think there must be something with how you sort of are trained to control and drive a car. So for me, I went into racing because my neighbor, as I said, was interested in racing. So he helped me get there, which was kind of a bit perhaps unusual. Rally would have been the more natural choice for me, I think, because I had it all around me, just didn't have any money to compete. But racing was not all around me. So I had this go-kart. I had to have friends drive me to the tracks, which were 50, 60 miles away from my home. Had to do all that stuff. But that's how it sort of fell for me, which I'm very happy about, obviously. But yeah.
So one of the big transitions that you see with European drivers coming over to the States is this daunting oval racing in a way. Obviously, the 500 is its own monster, but just you see a lot of different trends that drivers take, whether they initially are opposed to it, or they grow into it, or they love it from their first get on the oval. Starting in the IRL, which was an oval only series at that time. Where was that learning curve with you, and what was your first kind of perspective of this type of Americana racing?
Well, my first perspective was when I first tested a car, obviously, and that was at Phoenix International Motor Speedway. And I at the time I'd test driven Formula One and all kinds of things, but the speed you carry on an oval and the grip available when you set the car up to go left only, and that was enormous, I thought, compared to anything I've driven before. So that was the first eye opener. And then, of course, when you start driving on ovals, then you have other eye openers. So hitting the walls and all that stuff. So yeah, that comes along with it. It's a pretty gladiator-like motorsport, I think, in my eyes. Back when I drove, you couldn't maybe say that it was super safe on road and street courses, but compared to today, it's the risks are a lot less now. But oval racing, although small adjustments have been made, or big adjustments, I should say, for safety, but the pure speed of the cars and the closeness to the wall and everything makes it quite risky still, I would say. And that's an aspect that I love about racing. Unfortunately, in my eyes, the sport is moving more and more away from that. And that's good for safety, but it does also, for me, take away a little bit of the dimension.
Yeah, you look at your time in the IRL. Obviously, one of the big takeaways from that period was the pack racing that was happening, and in these daring moves that drivers would do with inches, if not less, between them. There's some of that kind of strap in and close the visor and get it done. But what were some of your back thought process of strapping in these IRL cars and tackling a 1.5 mile oval with inches around you?
Well, I mean, we were all happy to do it, and I think, it was viewed as part of the challenge. It is part of the sport. This is what you choose. This is what you love, and you accept it. I never really thought about the risks, more than once a year when I decided whether I wanted to sign up for another season. You can't be thinking about that because it doesn't do you any good in the races. You got to be focusing on training. You got to be focusing on, having the car, the setups, and working with the team. There's no real time and focus to think about the risks. So you strapped yourself in and you wanted to win,
Yeah, no, it's your success in that early IRL time, obviously your 500 victory, but that 98 season was very special and led to a championship. What parts of that season do you remember and you kind of recollect when thinking back of your accomplishments that year?
Well, there are a few things I remember. I started in 97 with Gallus Racing. They gave me the chance. And then in the end of that season, I got a phone call from AJ Foyt, who I never spoke to before then, because he was like somebody you didn't really go close to, because he was an icon, and so I was surprised to have the call, first of all, and so didn't really believe that it was him. But he was saying that, if I could fly to Las Vegas, we could discuss a deal for next year. And I was in Florida at the time at a friend's house, and I said to AJ, look, I can't fly to Las Vegas just to have a chat, but I can fly to Las Vegas if we can make a deal. So then he said, okay, let me have a word with my sponsor. And he did that, and he called me back 2 hours later, and he said, yeah, fly over and we'll make a deal tomorrow morning at breakfast. So that's how that happened, and I remember that very clearly. Also because I didn't feel that the sponsor, when we started the season, it was a little bit of a wall there a little bit, and anyway, so we drove and we won the championship, and then the sponsor was really happy. But then it was a lady. She told me, well, we didn't really want AJ to switch drivers because we were very happy with the driver we had. And then, of course, AJ, he told her that who was the boss of the team, and he does as he likes with that. So then I thought to myself, it's funny because he did take the time to call her to ask for her permission, but he didn't get it, but he signed me anyways. I don't know why he made that call. So that's one thing I remember. And then I remember another episode from that season, well, more episodes, but one episode when I finished third, I believe, at Texas Motor Speedway, and I thought I should win that race. I should have won it, because that's the way I looked at it. And I got into it in the trailer with AJ because I wasn't really happy over a third place. And so he told me that I should be happy over a third place. And I guess I told him I would be if the car would be okay, but the car is not okay. So he got angry, I got angry, and we, that was a bit of a scene. And then the next morning he called me to his office, and I thought, oh, he's going to fire me now. And then when I got in there, he said that I've checked your car and you're right. You didn't have the power that you need. So, but I'm going to put that right. So, and that was actually, that brought us to a level, yet another level closer to each other. And then we started winning races, and ran away with the championship that year. So that was a fantastic first year for him. And I also remember, of course, winning and leading the Indy 500 that year. And then we ran out of fuel, and AJ throwing the laptop in the pit lane and all that stuff. So it was entertaining driving for AJ, but he was such a winner and had such a lot of knowledge, about racing. And he became, I would say, the biggest mentor in terms of the racing craft side of my career. He was fantastic. He could, he looked out from the garage at Indy 500. He looks out looking at the trees in turn one, and he would say, no point driving today right now because the wind is from the wrong angle, it's too strong, and that's it. He just had this wealth of experience and knowledge, and it was fantastic to drive in his team, I thought.
So did you have any issues with a language barrier with that Texas drawl or anything like that, or some of those, you see those AJ-isms that are pop around on TV, and was there any of that challenge?
No, we got along pretty good. I remember the first time we had breakfast in Las Vegas there, I ordered yogurt, and he looked over and he shook his head. I don't eat yogurt. He wasn't, we weren't the same. Yeah. But I think we found each other in the will to win. I mean, he obviously, that's all he's about. And that's all I was about too. So we got along really good for that reason. And still today we talk once a quarter or something, and so we remained friends since then, basically. So no, it meant a lot to me, and hopefully I did some good for him too.
You look back at your career in the teams in IndyCar that you drove for. You mentioned Gallus, you drove for Ganassi, you drove for Rahal, all eventual 500 winners, championship cars. But going back to AJ and winning the 99 500 and adding his fifth, as he calls it, looking back on it, is that just such a cherished item in your career to be able to say that you were with the legend of the Speedway and really got that fifth win as an owner for him?
Yeah, we wrote a song named Legend of the Speedway about AJ, actually, and recorded a video at the Motor Speedway as well. So he is a legend of the Speedway. Well, they're all legends, but legends, but well, he is the winningest driver, and he's been around for so long, and his persona, let's say, he made him this larger than life figure, but aside from all that, I think he's down there on the floor. He's down there with the cars. He's down there, doing spanner work on the cars. Not now, maybe, but back then, he was in there with you. If you compare that with Ganassi or Rahal, they have an organization around them, so it's slightly different. They're obviously great because they put all that together, and they've been very successful at that. It's just there is just different ways of doing it. But I enjoyed a lot of success with AJ, and he's fun to be with as well. He's lots of humor, and he's a great guy, and so are the others. So it's he's good.
So 1999, you win the 500. You were so close the year prior, as you mentioned, coming off that championship season. What memories do you have of that race, and when you recollect on it?
Well, the recollection I have is that we of the race was that we made the last pit stop, and we really had to stretch the fuel because there was a lot of laps left to the checker flag, and so we were in fuel mode saving for a lot of the laps, and then I got the message from AJ that I could go to full rich, and obviously Robbie Gordon was leading. He had stopped a few laps earlier than us, so we were thinking, if we're just making it, it can't be possible that he can make it. But of course there was this worry about what if there's a yellow, then we were kind of screwed. But as it turned out, there was no yellow, and we ran him down because obviously he was on massive fuel saving strategy, where we could run the last 10 laps or so full speed. So it was that's what I remember. And then I remember when he ran out of fuel, and then the pressure, well, it wasn't off because obviously you can have an engine let go or something, or a puncture or something on the last lap as well. So it's always a bit nerve-wracking at Indy because it's so many things can happen. But at least we were in the lead, and we just had to nurse it home for a lap. That I remember probably the most clearly. I would say it's thought from the race day.
Yeah, we a few years ago, we had a exhibition here on AJ Foyt in his career, and obviously your car was a part of that, and they graciously loaned that. But one of the other interesting pieces of memorabilia, and we had a variety of trophies and vehicles and types of race cars and things like that, part of that exhibition. But they saved your wreath that you wore in Victory Lane. And it was in an acrylic box, and knowing that you see some of those wreaths after they do the media tour, or the just obviously the nature of it, it's a living floral arrangement. It tends to kind of fall apart pretty quickly or weather away, but they were able to preserve it, and it's part of the AJ Foyt collection. But it was a neat piece in that exhibition, and neat that it survived 18 years later, and still today.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I wish I had it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that in the moment, all the emotions, I assume it's hard to hang on to it with everything else you're grabbing, and the hat dance and the milk and everything like that all is part of winning the 500.
Yeah, but I have actually my helmet and my winning suit, and I took the helmet off my head, and I never washed it. I put it in a little helmet bag, so it's all in there, all with all the dirt on still, and all how the visors and all that stuff look. And the suit, I never washed it. I just took it off and put it in a suit bag, and it's nice to have those things. Not sure what I'm going to do with them, but it's nice to have them.
Well, you always have the museum here. We're always collecting. So when you're willing to potentially part with it, give us a call.
Yeah.
Just a quick note for some of the people that joined recently. If you have any questions for Kenny, please put them in the chat, and towards the end of the conversation, we can propose your questions to Kenny. And switching topics, you're one of the only drivers to have success in both IndyCar and kart, and making that switch not only to kart but then eventually back to IndyCar or IRL. What was that major change that you had going from the IRL, which at the time was a oval only series, and the cars obviously were built for that formula, to go in with those powerful kart vehicles?
Well, for me, it was I had won the championship and I won the Indy 500, and at the time in the United States there were two leagues, and it was quite a dividing thing, I think, for the fans and a lot of people. And I wanted to race with against everyone, so I came, I came, sort of felt that I need to go to kart and run kart as well. And I got an offer from Bobby's team, Bobby Rahal, very, very kind, to give me a contract. But it was hard for me to leave AJ because, we had a really strong connection. And so I said to Bobby, look, I'm going to drive for you next year, but I won't sign that contract until I've talked with AJ. But so at the time AJ had a stock car team as well, so he was down in Charlotte when I was going to talk to him, and so I flew to Charlotte, and so checked in at his hotel, and when he came back from the track, I was there, and he was like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I said, AJ, I need to talk to you about something. And so we sat down in his room, and I explained what I was going to do, and it was a really emotional conversation. For both of us, I had tears in my eyes. It was really, it was hard to leave his organization, but I also knew that I had a really good opportunity in kart with Bobby, and also a great team, and so anyway, he said, in the end, he was happy for me, and he said, look, I wish you well, and we stay in touch and that. And then I signed the contract with Bobby, and then it was a couple of months went by, and then all of a sudden Bobby called me to say that, what the hell are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? Well, you just entered a car in the Indy 500 together with AJ Foyt. You're co-owner of the car, and you need to be concentrating on kart, and this and that. And I said, okay, well, I didn't know about that. So then I called AJ, and he was laughing, because there was a practical joke he pulled, So yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, it's that time it was a civil war, obviously, and both sides had their staunch opinions on each other, and I could see that being a pretty shocking phone call, not only from your car owner, but to kind of be in the middle of that of a joke. So it's interesting tidbit. One of the things that you've helped us with here at the IMS Museum over the last few years, pre-COVID and this past year, is helped us with the vintage cars and running the vintage cars race morning that the museum prepares and brings to honor various different anniversaries. And you've had a chance a few times to drive your old winning car, the 99 Dallara, but then also, like this year, you drove the 1912 National, and there's a vast time difference between those two. What is it like for a driver to kind of step back in time and get behind a wheel these early race cars, especially, but vintage race cars, and how does that add to your perspective of racing as a whole?
Well, I mean, from a driver point of view, it's really interesting because obviously a lot has happened in the last 100 years or more with the technology and that. So it's really interesting to get an insight what it was like back then. Of course, yes, the track is now asphalt, and back then it was bricks and stuff like that. But it's still, you know, how they needed to work with the cars, and they had riding mechanics, and God knows why they would do that. You know, that's crazy. It's like co-drivers in rallying, you know. So you get an insight in that, and then of course all these cars are quite different to drive. All of them are different, you know. The clutch and the brake pedal could be in different positions. You know, normally you step in a car and you have the, you know, accelerator to the right, brake in the middle, clutch to the left. But here it could be clutch in the middle and brake to the left, and maybe throttle as well sometimes, you know. So you have to be a bit technically minded and sort of thoughtful how to drive them. And, you know, although it's not that speed, but still it's not so easy to jump in them. And of course these cars are old and fragile, so you don't want to you know, break them either. So, but it's really fun, and it's such a good thing also on race day, this tradition, you know, to drive around the track, and all the people, all the fans, and everyone's really lit up about it. It's really cool to be part of. So I've been very fortunate to be one of the drivers to help out with that.
Yeah, I may be a little biased, but it's one of my favorite parts of pre-race ceremonies. You know, being able to gather the cars and run with historical drivers and legends of the speedway in themselves, and then the cars that they in some cases drove to that victory. So we always tell people, be in your seats by 11:15. That's usually around the time that we run. So make sure that you're in your seats next year, and hopefully see Kenny once again drive another one of our cars, because he's been a stalwart in that position whenever he's attending the 500. So love to have you part of that and appreciate that help. You know, one of the things for maybe younger fans, over the last 30 years, the X Games obviously has been more of a skateboarding or snowboarding or things like that. But over the past, I think 15 years, they added rally in it. So being a gold medalist in the rally portion of the X Games and beating some pretty hefty competition when it comes to rally drivers, how was that?
That was a lot of fun. You know, I think I was the oldest one there. Um, and I was still a rookie, so that was kind of cool. Paul Page said the rookie wins it. It was the rookie being 10 years older or something than, or maybe more than the rest. But yeah, it was really cool, that stuff. You know, I never really been exposed to big jumps like that. You know, those are huge jumps. But you know, once I got the hang of that, I had a practice run over one of those jumps and totally destroyed the car because I landed on the nose, because I didn't know how to, you know, how to jump, let's say. So you land on all fours. It's quite a technique to that.
Mhm.
Of course, the motocross guys have that all sussed, and but I didn't. So we had a little bit of a panic to get the car ready, because the first heat was 45 minutes later and it tore off the whole front end. But we made it better and better all the way through, and we ended up winning it. It was fantastic. It was, you know, at the time I was retired. I hadn't driven a car in a competition or fast for like 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And I ran a driver development program, and one of the sponsors there, he built rallycross cars, and he was on me from the beginning of this program. You got to drive my car, and you got to do this, and come on, let's do it. And I said to him, you know, I'm retired. We're going to help young kids now, but he kept on it. And so in the end, for 4 years, I think it took him to persuade me. I said, listen, he was over 70 years of age, but really eccentric guy and cool guy. I said to him, look, I will drive your car. Where do you want me to go? And he said, well, we're going to go and do the X Games in the States. And I said, okay, I will drive the car on one condition, that you come with me. And I thought that maybe he wouldn't do it, and then I could get out of it. And he said, no, I don't want to go there. I said, well, then I don't drive. So then he said, okay, I'll come with. And so that's how that happened. And so we went over there and then had success, and that started sort of the second part in my career, because I thought, okay, maybe I could enjoy this a little bit longer, maybe do 1 or 2 races a year in various things. So that X Games race opened up, opportunities. I drove rally, like proper road rally with a co-driver in England and Scandinavia, and I drove some vintage racing at Goodwood and other places, and enjoyed it for a few more years. So that's thanks to the old man that persuaded me.
No, it's you mentioned the driver development. I mean, you were a very vital part of a lot of Swedish drivers' early career. You want to talk a little bit about that in your program?
Well, when I stopped racing, I thought to help some drivers from Sweden, because it is tough, to even if you're in go-karts and stuff like that, you've gotten on your way a little bit, but it's such a big leap to go into racing and finding the sponsors and all that stuff. So I decided to put together a sort of a driver development program with some people I knew, investors and sponsors. So helped Marcus Ericsson for his 7 first years, from karting to pretty much to Formula One. I stopped my involvement in GP2 with him, but we also helped Timmy Hansen a little bit, who is world champion in rallycross, for example. So it's a lot of fun that, to help some young people get their start, and then of course you hope they will be successful, and they both been successful. So that really feels like it was worthwhile doing, at least. So yeah.
So obviously, it success for your mentor drivers is not uncommon, as you mentioned. But how was it this year when you saw Marcus cross the yard of bricks and add another Swede to the Borg Warner Trophy, with all your backing and your history with the track and the series, but then this latter part of your career and mentoring? What was the feeling on that, seeing him become the victor?
No, it was really nice to see him take a victory there, because it makes I feel that it was well worth doing what we did back then. Of course, I haven't been with Marcus for the last 10 years, but it's nice to see that that he was able to win something really big, and that's it made me feel good about that. And obviously maybe not quite as good as he feels, but still it was a nice feeling that, it's always nice to see when people you have helped or something are successful. So
yeah, maybe something you taught him along the way helped him hold off Pato in turn 1. Maybe you could take some credit for that.
I know, no, I don't take credit for it, but he's probably learned a lot of stuff, but some stuff he learned in those early years. And I think that like I said, if no one's there with the connections in the sport and with to help with funding, it's extremely costly. And many young talented drivers run into the wall of not being able to go any further because they can't afford it. At least I was able to help him with that.
So transitioning into your current role with McLaren over the last about 7 years plus, you've been the chief test driver for McLaren and have helped develop a lot of their lineup of vehicles over the past year. What have you noticed about that position, and what you can bring to the table with developing these cars? And then also, how does it feel to conquer the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife?
Well, Nordschleife, if we take that first, that's like the Indy 500 or the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. you know, that's is probably, well, it's probably the most challenging road racing track in the world. It's old style still, you know. There's no mistakes there because you're going to end up in the walls and maybe in the trees outside the track even, because the speed is really high and like there's no real runoff area. It's so, a lap is 21 kilometers, you know, that you can't, I mean, if you look at a normal Grand Prix circuit today, it's possible to make them safe, but it's not possible when it's 21 kilometers. So it's a real, that's a real challenge, that track. Same as Indy, you know, very high speed, and you got to have your ducks in a row there. So that's what I think about Nürburgring. It's extremely challenging. So, and the other thing, you know, that also came out of racing. I had a dinner with the managing director at McLaren at Goodwood back in 2014 or 15, and we talked about cars, and you know, he asked me about what I thought about McLarens at the time, and I said, yeah, well, you know, I may not think they're the greatest. And then it didn't take so long, and then he called me to come and do a test with them and to help them with some testing on these cars. And so I did that, and then it sort of rolled on from there. All of a sudden I was spending most of my time on these cars, and so that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. So basically working with the engineering groups, helping and advising about, you know, how the car feels and maybe, you know, what could be done to make it a bit better. So that's very interesting for me because, you know, in racing, you have to be interested in the dynamic parts of the car to make the setup, because no driver wins a race without a great car. So you have to sort of engage in that and learn a lot. So for me, it feels like the perfect place to be. You know, I can take all that knowledge that I learned through racing, and I can apply it to sports cars, and it's really a lot of fun. That, so I think for me that's it feels like the perfect place really to be. Sure, it's challenging and all that stuff, but you know, I get to drive super fast cars all day. I get to work with technology. I get to work with engineers. I get to learn about new technology, because you know, road cars today, they are very advanced. I mean, active aero, you know, active ride heights, active damping, active differentials, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And these systems, how to make them work together and develop them, it's really exciting, that. And I think we make very good cars, because we win a lot of prizes for our cars, and you know, there are a lot different models. We spent 2 weeks in Cape Canaveral with the Speedtail we made a couple of years ago, and that's made for top speed. So we used the runway there for the shuttles to do these speed runs. And we made a car called McLaren Senna a while ago, and you know, that's a track car or road registered, but really high performance on the track, active suspension and all that stuff. So and we just released the Artura, which is a great car too. So yeah, there's a lot of cars and lots of fun.
Yeah, those hypercars and supercars, they're at the cutting edge of technology and what cars can do today. It's pretty amazing to see, and you know, you having a role in that and help guide that development is a pretty special position that a lot of people may look up to, either if they're purchasing the car themselves or if they're just admiring it in person or magazines, or even in video games, which is a big thing now too. So
Well,
what
we just took a car from So McLaren made a car for this video game called Gran Turismo, and really futuristic, beautiful car. And so they now we're going to make real cars, you know, and that's quite difficult because obviously when you design something for a video game, you don't have to take so much you don't have to pay attention so much if the driver can fit in the car, or if it's even possible to fit an engine, you know. But we've designed this car now, and it's called McLaren Solas GT. Fantastic looking car, really futuristic and extremely fast. You know, V10 engine, 840, 850 horsepower, and so yeah, it's fantastic to be involved in stuff like this.
So no, it's your career is pretty fascinating. Obviously, a championship driver in multi-disciplines. You have chief test driver to your name too. But in your spare time, you're a musician, and that may be something that a lot of fans may not know. You mentioned earlier the Legends of the Speedway, your tribute to AJ, if you will.
Yeah.
But how did you fall in love with music, and your background, and how did it lead you to that semi-profession today?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a semi-profession, but it's a big hobby of mine. And well, I started that also at a young age, you know, playing guitar. Well, I had to start with a recorder, you know, one of those things, and really boring. But I had to spend like 6 months on that before I could start another instrument. And then I started guitar because, you know, I grew up in the 70s when, well, it was ABBA, really, really popular all across Europe. But, you know, on Swedish radio, they had a program where they also played a lot of American rock and rock and roll music. And, you know, I quickly fell in love with Chuck Berry's style of playing guitar and that. So you know, that's what I wanted to do, you know. So I I had an acoustic guitar, so it was really difficult to make it sound like Chuck Berry's guitar. So I struggled with that, you know, but that's where the interest started. And then I kept it sort of going. And then when I drove IndyCar racing, there was a party at the Playboy Mansion, Hugh Hefner, and it was, you know, yeah, we were racing drivers, but nobody really paid attention to racing drivers, you know. So I said to Cristiano D'Amata was there. Patrick Carpentier was there. And I said to Patrick, do you play any instruments? I said, oh, hell yeah, I play the drums. Oh, okay, well, should we put together a band? He goes, yeah, we should put together a band. And that was great now, because now we were racing drivers and, you know, musicians. And that was a lot more fun to people, you know, when we talked to people there. So that's how we started. And then we tried to make that work, and we played a few shows, but we were quite busy with different teams and different testing schedules and sponsor arrangements and so forth. So it was hard to keep that band going. But then I hooked up with a guy called Gene Beer, who's a super musician, really talented. And he played a lot at the Slippery Noodle, where I used to hang out when I lived in Indy. So I asked Gene if he wanted to come along and, you know, set up a band with me. And he did, and had many people as guest players in the band over the years we played, you know, and we played different venues around when we raced. So could be small bar venues. We opened up for, I believe, Kid Rock and stuff like that with thousands of people, you know. So it was an exciting thing to have on the side of racing. Brian Herta was singing with us, you know, when we did some Sex Pistols, and it was really a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Mata was involved. He played guitar as well, and it was yeah, we had a good fun with that.
No, it's interesting. When we talked last week, I mentioned you know, Colton Herta plays drums, and I kind of bugged you to get the band back together and add Colton to that with Brian, and see how that goes. Maybe we can get something set up next year before the 500. But yeah, a few years ago, I think you played at the the Athenaeum and usually try to play when you're back in the States visiting the 500, right?
Yeah, if Gene's playing somewhere, I usually go and see him just to enjoy listening to him. He's such a fantastic guitar player. He's unbelievable. And so I sit there, and then usually he has a guitar and we make a song or something together. So yeah, and I have a band in London too. We write and record music together. And so it's a big interest of mine, that, but it's a hobby still. It's not, we're not trying to make a new Rolling Stones band or anything.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's it's been great conversation with you today. We do have a chat, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to add them to the chat here for the last few minutes that we're together. So James Leggett said, Kenny, what's the most impressive historic racing car that you've driven?
Oh, it's probably the AC Cobra Daytona. That's impressive. It's not. I've driven Ford GT40s as well, and they are slightly faster, but the Daytona is a wild car, and they only made 6 of them, so it's a very rare car as well. Yeah, it's a very simple car in the construction. It's got transverse leaf springs front and rear, and I remember when we developed the car, tested the car, we you want to make different shock absorbers or something, and to make leaf springs today is not easy, but we had a company in London who did that for us, so we were able to develop the car and put the spring rates we wanted on it and all that stuff, so it handled really well. And I drove it at Goodwood, we won there. I drove it at Nürburgring as well, the Nordschleife, and we sat on the pole and led the race, but it was too hot, so we had to retire. You couldn't drive the car. It was really a hot summer day, but it was, yeah, I would probably say that car.
You mentioned Goodwood a few times, and I've had the opportunity to visit the festival speed, which is the hill climb portion of it, but they also have the revival that races on the old historic Grand Prix track that they had just across the street. But you held the record on the festival of speed for road cars, correct?
Yes, we developed a McLaren car that we went to Nürburgring, Nordschleife, and set the lap record for street legal cars, and then we drove it back to England, and then a few weeks later we went to Goodwood for the hill climb, and we set the fastest lap up the hill with that car too. So yeah, it was had some success there too.
Yeah, it's a neat opportunity. You go up there and there's a bend, and on the inside of that is a flint wall that they built, I think during around World War II or something like that. But it's always amazing to see how drivers, they're trying to constantly get as much time and use as much real estate as possible, and it feels like they're almost touching that flint wall as they go barreling through there.
It's
in all the cars.
It's a challenging little hill actually, because when you get to that flint wall, not only it's a flint wall, but you come up towards it probably, well over 120, 140 mile an hour, and it's also covered with trees, so it's like you're driving into a black hole. You can't really see until you're quite close, and then you've got to have the right speed at that point, because you can't really do much, so it's quite tricky.
Are you participating in the revival in a few weeks?
No, not this year.
Okay, yeah, I think there's a few IndyCar representatives. I think Jimmy Johnson and Scott Dixon are going over there and trying their hand at the road course out there. But yeah, I think, like I said, I appreciate the conversation that we've had. You taking the time out of your evening. I know it's a pretty late evening over there for you in the UK, but thank you for taking the time and talking to our members here. Appreciate that. A few other things as we wrap this up. We hope to see you guys at our next Zoom conference with our Amaya Mims, our guest curator for Sleek. That will be October 4th. And thank you for supporting the museum and being a member and joining us this afternoon.